Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Kane's independent media production. Today, we are going on a journey from our run-of-the-mill, everyday, totally okay floor tom sound to something with a lot more beef, projection, everything we want. Many of the most prominent drummers out there right now have something akin to a signature sound that fans of theirs will sometimes deify almost to the point of madness. And when we hear these sounds and when we see these players, it's very difficult to tell if what we're hearing is just the drum or the drum in conjunction with mixing or editing or compression or, we really can't know. What this means for us is that if we are chasing an idealized sound but haven't taken the time to move through a few iterations to try to learn what the drum is capable of, it's very difficult to find our way towards something that's really going to make us happy on the kit right in front of us. What this means to me, and what this means to us here, is that no matter how your drum sounds, whether it's a snare, kick, toms, whatever it is, if you're happy with it, that's great, but there's no reason not to see if there's something else in there that could give you more inspiration, different inspiration, or fit the context you're in a little bit better. If nothing else, by doing this, you're going to learn something about the behavior of your personal drum and the way that it tunes up. Without further ado, let's hear where we're starting with our floor tom today. This is a very familiar sound to me. It's a sound I grew up with. It's a sound I find on backline kits and in studios and on my friends' drum sets from time to time. Again, this is not a wrong sound. This is just a common sound that we want to take a little bit further. Stepwise today, the first thing that I noticed when I came to this drum is that it has gaff tape on the batter head and it has gaff tape on the resonant head. So the first thing we want to do is take all of that off to hear what we're actually working with. This is a bananas sound, and it makes sense why someone might consider wanting to put a little tape or muffling on there to help focus it in, because the overtones are a little wild, it's growly, but at the same time, it's also not a wrong sound. This sound is actually possibly really fun under the right circumstances. Part of the reason why these journeys are valuable is to stumble upon things along the way that perhaps you can recreate later if you decide you want to file that sound away for the future. The next thing we need to address is how this instrument is actually tuned right now. As I'm checking out the heads, I'm noticing that not only are neither of them in tune with themselves, but they are both tuned extremely low. Given the fact that maybe like your kid at home, these heads have been on the drum and they've been played a little bit, they're not as pliable as a brand new head, so we need to put a little more tension on here so that they can actually activate and resonate. This is going to alleviate some of that basketball-y sound that we are noticing in there. It's also going to give us more tone, which is something that we need if we want this drum to project beyond the edge of the kit. In past episodes, we have addressed ways to alleviate this high-pitched, overtone, basketball-y kind of sound, but today we're going to strictly stick to tuning, no hacks inside of the drum, nothing extra like that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to increase tension on the batter head to where it's getting into the range that feels good to me and is overall in tune with itself. Weirdly enough, this is also a totally usable sound. It's unusual. It's more of a special effect, to me, it's not the first place I'd go if somebody said, make my drums sound like drums, but still pretty cool. The feel of the drum is now giving me more rebound back because of this tension. It's still a little wild in the overtones because of where the resonant head is at, but now if I want to play faster patterns on it, or if I want to get tone out of it through the dynamic range, it's giving me a lot more of that. We want to mention at this juncture that in talking about playing dynamically, we're not necessarily saying that this is for people who play quietly or who are always moving through extreme quiet to extreme volume. What we're really talking about here is making sure that the instrument speaks if you choose to move through any difference in volume, whether you're super aggressive 90% of the time and occasionally a little quieter, or vice versa. This is just an opportunity to make sure that whatever choice you happen to make while you're playing, it's gonna come out of the drum and make it to the audience. Now for the final step in this process, we're gonna pitch up the resonant head. The interval between the two heads, depending on the instrument, can vary in terms of what gets the sound you want out of the drum. Today, when we tuned this up, we ended up with an interval of a minor third, which is to say that the resonant head is a minor third higher than the batter head. Now, for anybody who's shouting at their screen, what pitches did you tune the heads to? It doesn't matter, because that's one variable and it is the least of our worries. The heads we have, the size of the drum, the depth of the drum, the size of the room, whether or not there's blankets on the walls, all of these things are going to affect our end result. So don't sweat too much what this note is or what that note is, and consider instead moving through some options on your own drum in your space to see what gives you the tone that makes you happy. Something that led us to starting out with this drum today is the idea of a low sound. What is a low sound? Well, if you tune the drum so low that it actually can't resonate and grow when you put energy into it, then the low frequencies that we're looking for are actually getting lost in the face of having tons of attack and something that feels like powerful low end right where we are, but doesn't travel and doesn't actually get into the microphones or the room or your friends or your rehearsal or whatever it is that you might be doing with your kit. Additionally, and we have also addressed this numerous times in the past, if we are playing extremely slack heads on a large drum like this, the life of the heads is at risk. They're going to get worn out faster, they're going to get pitted faster, and they may break faster as well, simply because without that tension on there, the head cannot assimilate the energy that's going into it and make the sound. It just goes in and crushes into the head itself. If you're used to having your drum tuned very, very loosely, this may feel unusual to you when you first start to hit it, especially if you're tuning a 16 like this to match the range that we ended up in. I would invite you to consider, if it does feel weird, to experiment with how much rebound you put into your strokes onto the drum rather than playing hard into it and forcing all of that energy into the drum, because part of having this tension is that we can use that rebound and effectively get more sound out of the drum with less effort. Now, let's hear all of these iterations back to back. As we can hear from this, none of these are objectively terrible. They're just all different, and if one appeals to you more than the rest, that can be your stopping point. We chose to finish where we did because this is a great spot that we like to be for starting out, which is to say, not too low and with a lot of tone and a fair amount of sustain as well, which then we can deviate from as much as we need to. It's also very important for us to mention at this point that we are calling this a floor tom even though it is mounted on a suspension mount rather than on legs. Everything we're talking about here applies to a 16-inch or a 14-inch drum that is on legs. Absolutely. We refer to this as a floor tom because of its placement and also because it's a very large drum. It's easy for us to get hung up in the semantics of the mounting style and what we call that drum, but the big takeaway from this is that when we're dealing with drums that are 14 inches in diameter or over, some of these issues start to show up, from the basketball issue to loss of sustain or sometimes too much sustain, and there's a lot we can do with tuning and muffling if need be to organize all of that into the sound we need. Hopefully this has been helpful. Thanks so much for coming along with this. If you like what you saw today, please follow the Patreon link below. There's lots of ways to help us continue to do this show on there, and extra content as well. Lots of fun things there. Also, like, comment, subscribe, and do tell us your floor tom tuning scenarios. What has worked for you? Did you find something weird that you loved? Did your bandmates hate it? We'd love to know.